Thank you for coming to the next installment of the Sagan National Colloquium. This semester we are investigating data in our lives. We're bringing in a lot of speakers and artists and films to investigate the effects that all of this ubiquitous data that's around has effects on us and our society, both for the positive and for the negative. Tonight's speaker is a very good friend of mine for about 20 years now, Paco Hope. Paco Hope is a senior information security professional with a long career helping Fortune 100 firms build and deploy software securely. He has a bachelor's degree in computer science from the College of William & Mary in Virginia and a master of computer science from the University of Virginia. He has spent the last 15 years consulting and teaching software security and security testing. He is a member of the European Advisory Council for ISC², which is a global security certification body, and helps write certification exams for information security professionals. He is based in London and works with major enterprises throughout Western Europe. He is passionate about security and privacy, as well as cigars and single malt whiskey. Please welcome Paco Hope.
Great, thanks, Sean. Yeah. Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here, and thank you all for coming out to talk about this. What I'm trying to talk about here as we think about the bits of our humanity, it's digitizing, right? It's taking our lives, the analog world around us, this real world around us, and actually quantizing it and turning it into digital bits. And if you're thinking about digital bits, if you're thinking about digitizing things, there's explicit digitization that we do as we go about our lives and we fill out online forms and we fill out paper forms, which end up just being entered into a computer. We do this digitization to sort of help turn our analog world into something that computers can process, because in many ways things that computers can process will in fact help us over time. So that's the explicit digitization. That's the explicit bit that we participate in and we sort of know we're doing it. But there's a lot of implicit digitization that happens. And so if you think about like going to a website, and basically all websites on the internet are pictures of cats these days, right? That's kind of what the internet is for. We had this vision back in the 1970s, like wouldn't it be great to be able to get as many cat pictures as you would like anywhere in the world? And we created this thing we called the internet. And so, you know that if you've ever been to any website in the last 20 years, it's not just the cute cat picture, but you're going to see ads. You should be buying cat food, don't you want to buy cat food? And these days, in more modern apps, in more modern websites, you'll see, the extra nonsense at the bottom. I mean, we have a term for this, right, called clickbait. You have these articles and things that entice you to click for more ads and whatnot. Any reasonable website's going to have social media login or share this, tweet this, that kind of thing on there, as well as some other bits that you don't really see, but they're in there and they cause your computer to download or compute things. And so to actually give you this experience, to give you this page constructed this way, there are a bunch of system servers, websites involved that are not just the one giving you the cat picture. So you have like an ad network. Your computer connects to some ad network to deliver the actual advertisement. And so now this ad network knows that you've been here, and it knows that you're on this page with cats, and we know that we sent you a cat food advertisement. Those social media logins actually arrive at your computer through a connection from your computer to the social media website. So that share button or tweet or like or whatever doesn't come to you from the same page that's sending you the cat picture. It actually comes from the social media site itself. So now it knows where you've been and that you've been there and that you saw a cat picture. It knows when you were there. If that same web browser that you use is in fact logged in, it's not just aware, that someone saw this cat picture, but like that social identity saw this cat picture by virtue of the fact that your computer is connecting to them. Now there's this other bit of analytics stuff, and I'm going to talk to you about analytics in more detail in a minute or two. But there's other stuff that your browser will make a connection out, will fetch it from an analytics company, and will then process that in some way. Maybe there's a visual element, something you can see. Oftentimes there isn't. And it's going to fetch a little JavaScript. It's going to fetch some little image or something, a transparent image. And again, now this analytics company knows that you've been there. They know which page you were on and when you were there and so on. And then finally, the clickbait stuff could very well be another ad network, a completely different advertising network that's putting different content out there, making it part of this experience. And now they too know that you've been here, that you saw this ad, that you saw this cat, and so on. So this is like a website. So you've been to a website and this is what's happened. And if we want to do that at scale, like have you had that experience where you're shopping for a backpack or bicycle or shoes or whatever, and then you go look at the news and there's an ad for the bike or the backpack or the shoes, and then you go over and look at the sports page and there's the backpack or the bike. They're sort of following you around. Have you guys experienced this? Yeah, okay, show of hands. You guys are seeing it. That's because all the websites that you're going to, they're all kind of interacting with the same advertising networks. There are some big networks that deliver most of the ads for you. And so that means that each time your web browser goes to see cat pictures, and it fetches an ad from those people. Then your web browser goes to see sports, but the sports page tells your web browser go back to that same ad network and pull another ad. And the ad network's like, oh, you again. You were thinking about backpacks, weren't you? And so as you go around, all these things, every page that you go to is they're all invoking the social networks, they're all invoking the analytics, they're all invoking the clickbait, whatever. And this isn't to say that there's like one great gigantic ad network that absolutely every website uses, but there's a lot of overlap, right? There's a lot of the top properties on the net use a handful of advertising networks. And so this is how we sort of implicitly digitize our lives. As we sort of move across the web with our web browsers, we digitize our lives. And the goal is this sort of getting some kind of sort of digital picture and then associating with a person, what are the bits and things that make that person unique and interesting, and what are the things that they like. They like travel, they like whiskey, they like various brands, that where the person lives. This ad network builds up a portfolio of information as you sort of move across the net. And some of that is good. I mean, let's be clear, sometimes there is some serendipity of, oh yeah, I really was looking for a backpack, and ooh, that's a nice one. Sometimes that happens. And some of it is, well, there's debate, right, about the value. So this is one way that we sort of digitize our motion through the internet, our motion through what we do, but that's just the web. As all I've talked to you about is web browsers. So, you're going to have an app on your phone, and again, since most of the internet is populated by cats, you're probably going to want What's Cat, right? That's our mobile app, so you're going to have one of these guys. And obviously you'll have some functionality in there that'll let you look at some pictures, it'll let you look at videos and all that sort of thing. But if you're going to have an interesting cat app, well, I got to find cats near me, right? I mean, that's kind of important. Like you're walking around, is there a cat near me? That'd be really cool to know. And you're going to want to be able to, send meows to the meow little. Oh, I've received 3 meows. Look at that. Right, this is your typical mobile app construction. And it doesn't just have these features. You know that there will be some social media logins, and if it's a free-to-use mobile app, there's probably some ads in there too. All right, so this is what a typical mobile application looks like. And in order to deliver this functionality, well, to find out where the cats are near me, I'm going to have cats as a service, right? There's a business model here, I'm telling you. And I'm going to have to send them my GPS location, right? I'm a cat, I'm at this GPS location, I want to find more cats. And so there's some service in the sky that gets all the cat locations and then can help you find the ones near you. If I want to be able to send a meow to another cat, I'm probably going to have to share some kind of identifier, some kind of phone number or something. And that's going to go to some push message service, which will then be able to push things to me and from me. That ad network, probably the same ad network. So as it can see you moving from a web browser to a mobile app, logging into Facebook with the same credentials, knowing the same identities, because you know what? You've got the social media login on the mobile app. So this app knows who you are, and the ad network can connect these two identities, your web browser identity and your mobile app user identity. And so we can actually sort of understand what's going on there. And finally, these are going to have their own sort of analytics. Now, what are analytics? This is an interesting question. Analytics are a broad term of capabilities to understand how people use technology. Websites will use analytics because we want to know, how did this person get here? Did they find our website through a Google search? Did they link to us from the New York Times? How did they get here? How long did they stay here? Which pages did they look at? How long did they linger on those pages? Do we think they really read the whole article, or did they just skim it? You know, and where did they go after that? Did they leave us, or did they click a few links on the site and stick around? So on the web, that's what they do. In a mobile app, if you are the one who's writing WhatsCat, like, you care what your users do because you want to spend time on the things your users like, and you want to get rid of stuff your users don't use. So maybe the whole like kitten thing just isn't, you know, nobody's clicking on the kitten videos. We might figure out that we don't want those. So analytics is the way to find out which features are people using in our mobile app, how long do they spend on those features, how much time do they spend in our app in the average day, and it's been all those sorts of things. One of the mobile manufacturers I worked with, and this was a handset maker, uses analytics to sort of spot apps that are draining your battery. Because you know that you've got this such and such brand phone, and if your battery is draining, you don't think, boy, those guys who wrote that crummy WhatsCat app, they suck. No, you're thinking, this phone is terrible, and it might actually be a bad app that's burning CPU and burning your battery really badly. You know, you don't know which apps are doing this. And as a mobile phone manufacturer, they use analytics to say, you know, this app is actually a problem. They can reach out proactively to an app maker and say, hey, WhatsCat, could you guys like fix that? Because that's really causing problems for the users. So that's the good side of analytics. Now, if you think about a mobile app, you might think that this is what mobile apps look like when you build them. That you have, you know, your code, you have the stuff that you write, and then you have kind of the mobile operating system. And it sort of works that way, but we're going to explain it in a little more detail than that. And I want to explain a particular permission issue. This is it's going to turn into a really interesting story when we get to the end of it. If you're dealing with an Android mobile phone, Android users, where are you? Don't worry, iPhone users, I'll get to you. So you guys have Android, and if you're anything before Android 6.0, the security model is you go to install an app. Hey, I want this app. And the app says, well, you know what? I need access to your contacts. I need access to make phone calls. I need access to the network. And your choices are, A, give me everything I asked for, or B, no, you don't. You can't have the app. Like that's your binary choice. You could either give it everything it wants or give it nothing at all and not have the app. And you know, if you're an iOS, you have the choice of, well, I'll get the app, but when it asks to access my calendar, I'll say no. And when it asks to access my contacts, I'll say yes, because I'm okay with that. But in the Android world, you can either get the permission or not. You either get it and you're installed and you can do whatever you like, or you don't get permissions and you don't get installed. Okay, that's a baseline. One of my clients was a retailer in the United Kingdom, so famous brick and mortar retailer. They've got shops all over the UK. And they came out with their first mobile app. And really, you know, the first generation mobile app, and we have an expression for this, a minimum viable product, right? It was a pretty basic mobile app. It doesn't do much. In fact, it pretty much logs you into the online store and lets you shop or see your orders, that sort of thing. Now, when you build an app like that, you don't really go create your own push message library. You don't create your own analytics. You don't create your own user interface. You tend to go get code from somewhere else. and you put that into your app. Because I'm not going to go write a push message thing that knows how to send SMSs to phones. I'm not going to do that. I'm a retailer. I sell, as my friend used to say, who worked there, he said, we just sell knickers and fish. That's what we do. So they don't do push messaging. They don't do analytics. So you incorporate that. And their analytics package had this feature in the code that kind of said, hey, can I get the GPS location of the user? Oh, I don't have permission for that? That's fine. I'll send the analytics data without any location. That's fine. So that's how they're using it, and version 1 is out, and users are happy, and that's all fine. For version 2, one of the features they wanted was find a store near me. Like I say, it's a retailer. They've got shops all over the United Kingdom, so one of their features is find a store near me. And so when you go to install version 2 in your Android phone, it says, oh, by the way, this app wants location. Not that you're sure to use it. You may not actually use the find a store feature. But again, it's, do you want to give it access to your location, or do you want to not install this? That's your choice, and so it installs. Now, the analytics program runs along and says, oh, hey, by the way, can I get the user's location? Oh, I can. Cool. I'll send that along with the analytics data. Now, my client, the retailer, had no idea that that's kind of how this worked, right? That analytics stuff is a third-party black box as far as they're concerned. They don't know how it works. They just see the reports on what people are doing with the app. But now they're receiving GPS location really as a side effect of a design change. Now that they do find a store, they get a design change, and they can suddenly start seeing GPS data. So as you build a mobile app, and as anybody builds a mobile app, you always have to say, you've got some third-party code in there. Do you know what it does? Do you really know what it does? But for the technically inclined in here, a lot of these things are shared libraries or class files that you just link into your app. They just become part of the binary. So that helps us sort of digitize our lives as we move around, so that an individual app owner might actually not just know that you're using their app, but kind of know where you're standing when you're doing that. And of course, the phone itself, the platform itself, so see iPhone users, you get yours now. The phone itself is interested in tracking you and so on. And again, none of this is done maliciously. It's not like everyone wants to hurt people. It's actually done for very good reasons, but some of it ends up creating data that becomes part of our lives and changes how we operate. Installed apps. So Apple knows me. I have an iPhone. Apple knows all of you because those of you that have iPhones. And it can say, popular near me. If it knows where I'm standing, and it knows that you're sat there in the audience, and if it knows that, 20 people in this audience have What's Cat installed, it might say, hey, Cat's really popular at OWU. Maybe you should install What's Cat. Just because it's got my location, it's got your location, and it happens to know that we're near each other. The one I think is really interesting is the diagnostics and usage. This is one of these unfortunate things where diagnostics sounds like a great idea. Your phone has crashed. Would you like to send an update to us? We will make a better phone thanks to you telling us how it crashed. You know what? As an end user, I'm cool with that. I'm into better phones and better user experiences. I would love to send you diagnostic data. But they put it on there as diagnostics and usage. Can we just find out how you use the phone all the time, even when it's running normally? And that's the part where, personally, I'm less keen on. But they've sort of bundled it together. I can either be helpful in a crash and also just tell you everything I do, or I tell you none of it. So they've sort of created that choice for me. And a lot of these things, by the way, on a phone, it's actually not that easy to find these things. You end up having to, go to privacy. Kudos to them for making privacy a top-level option. But then you have to scroll quite far down before you find things like, the system bits and the status bar icon, which is a lot of fun. If you turn that on, that status bar icon, suddenly you'll discover that your location is being asked for by lots of apps, all the time. All right, so this means that as we move through space and time, as we walk, as we shop, as we do things, this device that's on us and is fairly intimate and knows an awful lot about us is also kind of reporting where we go. But what about real life? So we've talked about the web, we've talked about mobile apps, what about like as we move through shops and stores and things? And sure, I like to say there's no such thing as a free Wi-Fi. You're giving something up to get the Wi-Fi most of the time. Most of us, when we set up our Wi-Fi at home, you say, give me the biggest, strongest antenna you can get, and I want to max out the transmission power, because I want to get good Wi-Fi out in the yard, I want to get good Wi-Fi in the garage, I've got the Wi-Fi up in the second floor, and I need to get it in the basement too. Maximize that big old antenna. What if instead you set up a bunch of very small micro antennas that don't have very much wattage, don't have a lot of range, and that can actually sort of calculate and triangulate the strength of the signal that they hear from devices? So if you have a shop floor, if this is the blueprint of your shop floor, you can get sort of a heat map of, where did people go and where did they stand and where did they spend a lot of time physically in the store by using the Wi-Fi signal to triangulate on individual IDs. And you can go right up to the point of sale, right? You know when somebody stood at the register. You know how long they stood there. You know what they bought because you can go look in the transactions of the register and say, yeah, that register at 8:42 a.m. Sold these items. And then you say, well, that's probably this mobile device. Let's wind it back. Where did that person walk through the shop and what did they spend time on? So you can learn an awful lot about how people move through your shops. If you ever walk into a store and you think, man, this store's nice, I like this. It's probably because they've done a lot of data and a lot of looking, and they want you to enjoy being there, right? That's probably a shop that spent a fair bit of time studying how people move and what they want. And if you walk into a store and you feel comfortable, it's probably the result of this sort of thing. Not necessarily a bad thing. But this is all sort of digitizing people and as they move and what they do so that we can understand our own selves better. So there must be some benefits to all this, right? I mean, you can tell from the tone of my voice, I'm fairly skeptical and I'm not a big fan of privacy invasions, but I also want you to get a balanced view on this. It is not all bad, and it's actually fairly interesting, some of the things that get created through the digitization of our society. Now, the first thing somebody might answer if you ask an advertiser or somebody who's involved in ad tech like this, they'll say, well, you get a better experience. We're optimizing the user experience, and ads, nobody who's in the advertising business wants ads to be annoying. Like, they don't want that. I had breakfast with a friend of mine at one of the big social media companies, and he's working on all this technology, and that's actually very important to them. They don't want the ads to annoy you. They want the ads to be something you don't mind so much. So, sure, that's a benefit of all this advertisement and all this digitization, but there are actually better benefits, far more compelling benefits than that. How many of you read some news about a big political event that happened last night? How many of you read some news? Come on, get your hands up because this is important. Now keep your hands up if you read that news on a site where you paid for access to that site. I got 2, 3 hands, exactly. So that is what this digitization paid for, right? So you got, and some of you probably saw some credible news, right? You saw analysis and writing, and you said, that was credible, that was reasonable, that was in intelligent analysis of what happened, and you, in some sense, got it for free. You traded over some data. You gave them information about what you were doing and who you are in order to receive that information. And that's one of the benefits that we receive. We are fundamentally giving up our digital data, our behavior and our actions, and in return we get journalism of varying degrees of accuracy and usefulness. Moreover, you get all sorts of websites and web services that simply exist, that could not exist, that you simply couldn't pay for. Think of all the professions who are not technical professions. Here's a number of them, doctors and lawyers and accountants and so on. Do they know what it takes to do distributed file sharing? Do they know what it takes to do video conferencing? Do they know what it takes to do instant communication by text message globally? No, they don't, but they benefit from it, right? And we all actually live in a better society as a result of non-technical professionals having access to some pretty amazing technology. And so this is, in many ways, by giving up or by digitizing our lives and letting businesses sort of work with that data and resell that data and sell to us, we're sort of delivering on that internet promise, right? We had this lofty idea of the internet, free movement of information and helps us all and it expands all our minds. And in many ways, this is what that is creating. I mean, we enjoy the free flow of information pretty well, and the digitization is part of the process that we pay for. And of course, there are jobs that don't even exist yet, right? And technology is creating those jobs. How many of your parents could have put down drone pilot as what they wanted to be when they grew up, right? It couldn't have happened. We didn't even think of it that way. It didn't exist. But that is a new career. That will be a career in 5 or 10 years, drone pilot. Could very well be a bus driver who never actually leaves a building, right? There are already train drivers in London who aren't on the train. The DLR, Docklands Light Rail, that goes down into Canary Wharf. There's no drivers on that train. It's all run, centrally. So these are technologies that are being created today, and this digitization of our lives helps propel and power that. And we have better sort of diagnostic and better knowledge sharing, better medicine. I just snagged, I don't have any partiality to say epilepsy or seizures, but I pulled this because of the 1970s military record of someone who had suffered a seizure in the military. And you sort of look at like the level of resolution that, the diagnostic capability here. And then today, through technology, we're able to have a much finer grained understanding of medical conditions like this. And all of this is technology that is largely propelled by digitizing medical data, by digitizing medical outcomes. We can come up with a finer grained and a more clearly defined spectrum. Though that also gives us the difficulty of spotting things that are truly new. If there wasn't a diagnostic capability in the computer that recognizes a condition, then we're stuck as medical professionals, wondering, is this something genuinely new, or does it really belong in one of our digital buckets that we already have? But still, the digitization of human medicine and medical conditions improves patient outcome. Right, so that's another kind of digitizing that we do that improves our lives. So digitizing the world around us changes us, and it changes the world around us. It changes your experience of the world. I was in Barcelona a few weeks ago for the weekend, and despite being named Paco, I don't actually speak a whole heck of a lot of Spanish. And I haven't been to Barcelona very many times. It was my second trip. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. And so it's a pretty common problem. In a foreign city, don't really speak the language, don't know the culture all that well. I need to find a place to eat dinner. How am I going to do that? What are you going to do? You get out the app, right? There's an app for that, right? And so we go on and we start looking for reviews and things. And immediately, this is kind of what happens to my life. Some of the map becomes dark because nobody's ever been there. Nobody's reviewed those things. There's no reviews on those things. And some of the map is kind of shiny and accessible. People have been to this place. In fact, 20 people have been to this place. And they say it's good, and they say they like it. And they've written a review in a language that I understand, probably based on cultural norms that are familiar to me. And so I can understand their review and say, that sounds like something I would like to go to. But what if I speak French? I might actually use a completely different app, because if I'm French and I'm from France, there may be a completely different app that the French tend to use. And when you're in the French language version of the Google Play Store, or the French language version of the Apple Store, you're going to be shown different apps that appeal to you, that are written from your cultural background and written from your basis. And you will see a different kind of map that's kind of shinier in some places and darker in others. And we have this big building in the middle here that's very shiny. It appears to be on kind of everybody's maps. And if you're from Japan, you might have a completely different experience of the city, because the bits that show up for you that are written by your culture and written in your language on an app that you're likely to download are completely different. And, it's funny, the particular app that I use for for restaurant reviews and things. Well, it's one that I brought from America to London with me. And I've noticed that when I read reviews of places, and when I'm doing this, and I'm reading reviews of places in England, a lot of these reviews are American tourists who don't have a ton of experience with England. And so, the pub was loud, and it was crowded, and the service was slow, and 2 stars. I'm like, actually, this is England, man. The pubs are loud, the pubs are crowded, the service is slow, and that is normal. It turns out that's a 4-star pub because the beers are all local, the staff are wonderful once you get to know them. And so you start to see the sort of cultural difference in working into where I go and what I do. By having these people digitize their experience and record their experience, then they have changed my perception of things. So I'm sat in Barcelona having breakfast at this cafe that was actually quite close to my hotel, and it's amazing. The food is just fabulous. And I noticed that the couple sat next to me, they're American, and the couple on the other side of them are British. And the waiter is speaking to me in perfect English. The menu is in fact written in English. And that's when it sort of dawned on me, like, this is on my map, and it's shiny to me, and it's lit up on my map because it caters to me and my culture and has done. And this is a great place if you're American or you're British and you're an English speaker and you want to enjoy Barcelona. This is a great place to come because it would be very easy, it would be very comfortable. Whereas some of those dark places on the map, well, I don't know, they might only speak Catalan there. It's, Barcelona is part of Catalonia, right? And they prefer to speak Catalan, and they'll speak Spanish if they must, and some of them speak English. So your experience is going to be completely different depending on who you are and where you come from and what you're looking at. And this is one of the effects of digitization. We're making some parts of the map shiny. We're making some parts of the world easier to access, and it in some sense darkens the rest of the map. It darkens the rest of the world so it's less accessible. And that's one of the outcomes that is unclear, I think, at this point, how good or bad that is for us. What does that help us? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Surely that cafe that does very, very well with the elite app using tourist, they're benefiting from it. But it's not clear the other shops that don't show up so well, are they benefiting or not? So there's a few other things that go wrong with some of the digitization. I just want to get this across as an idea of lessons we have learned as a society, and we continue to learn as a society. Start with the oldest one first, which was AOL, back when AOL was a thing. They released search data, and it was anonymized. And they said, look, this is interesting because you can learn from the search data and we can learn things about our users, but we're not going to violate anybody's privacy because it's all been anonymized. And some researchers sat down with that data and said, isn't it anonymized? Let's see, what could we do? And in fact, they were able to wind it back and get down to the particular woman on a particular street and go knock on her door and say, is this the stuff you were searching on the internet? And she took a look at it and said, oh gosh, yes, that is me. So the data that we collect seems anonymous, and it is anonymous while it's all part of the big pool. But it is not hard to pick a thread out of that pool and de-anonymize it. This is a little more recent. It's still about 5-6 years old. It turns out that analytics on shopping habits are a really interesting predictor of behavior, and you can learn a lot about people by watching how they shop. And so in this case, Target was the retailer that they had developed an analytics algorithm, and they noticed that women's shopping habits changed pretty significantly and pretty obviously when they learned that they're pregnant. They start buying unscented lotions, and you start buying more of certain products and less of other products. And so there's a girl who was 16 years old and had her Target card or whatever, and one day this pack of coupons and stuff shows up, and it says, hey, congratulations, you're expecting. And this is the kind of thing that Target was doing to lots of folks. They detect that you're pregnant, and or they get a good guess that you're pregnant, right? And then they say, oh wow, let's encourage them to buy baby products, and let's not send them any coupons for wine or beer because it's not going to go over so well. So they send this packet, and it shows up with the girl's name on it. You know, she's 16 years old, congratulations that you're expecting, and her dad loses it, right? What are you talking about? My daughter is 16 years old. Are you encouraging her to go get pregnant? Are you out of your mind? And he storms down to the store and reads the manager of the riot act. The manager, of course, like, dude, it's corporate, man. It's not me. It's not like I, mailed that to you. And they come home, and the daughter's like, Dad, there's something I need to tell you. So they sort of let the cat out of the bag. The Target was right. She was pregnant. She did know. She hadn't gotten around to telling Dad yet. I can imagine that's a conversation that you want to approach at the right time in the right way. And Target had just sort of let the cat out of the bag. And so, and I really like the way this guy says this, even when you're following the law, you can do things that make people queasy. So this is one of the effects of digitizing our lives, that things can get exposed and can get learned. They're not really intending to reveal and they're not really intending to share, but it can be discovered and detected anyways. The last one here is kind of interesting because now we're going to get a little technical, and this gets into my field because cryptography and security and that sort of thing is where I spend most of my days. New York City, if you remember a few years ago, Mayor Bloomberg was like, data-driven city. I'm going to give lots of people data, and I want them all to expand on it and play with it, and let's learn things and make our city better by data. Great idea, right? It's a good idea. It's digitizing our lives, data in our lives. And what they did was they released all this New York City taxi data. Now, as you know, New York City taxis have a medallion number, and that's it identifies the taxi owner. And there's a certain number of, there's only like 14,000 of these medallions. Based on the pattern of the medallion identity, right, you can have as many as 245 billion of these things. But they don't want to release medallion numbers. That would violate people's privacy, the driver, where he goes, what he does, who he picks up, when he put them down, how much money he made. You don't want that available. So they want to release this data, but they want to anonymize the driver's identity, so they do a thing called a hash, an MD5 hash. Now, this is a cryptographic mathematical formula. It's a one-way function. So given something like, 9C19 as an input, I can produce this output. And it's mathematically one way. You can't take that output and know that I started with some input. You can't reverse it. Cool. It's actually used in security all over the place. But while I can't reverse this, I can't go from this crazy string here back to ABC123. I can't figure out that that's what that is by running the math backwards. What I can do is potentially calculate all 245 billion possible hashes, and then look at the data file, and if I see this one, I'm like, well, let's go figure out by just looking up which one is that? Of the 245 billion possible, this must be in my file somewhere. Let's go figure out, oh, it's the one that came from ABC123. So you can't reverse the math, but you could potentially calculate them all and then just look them up. It's like, if you're speaking in code, and you've got, code word that, frog means policeman and dove means fireman or whatever. Like, I could write out all the words and then just go look them up, even if I can't run the math backwards. So what does it take to do 245 billion MD5s? That's going to be a lot of computer horsepower. Sure, but one of the great things about MD5, one of the reasons it's popular, is it doesn't take a lot of computing to do an MD5. And on a modern laptop, you could get through all 245 billion of them in a day. So you could just calculate all the possible hashes. You're only looking for 14,000 that really exist, but you could go ahead and calculate all 245 billion of them. On a modern hashing rig, which is a thing we use for cracking passwords, you can get through this in a few minutes. I'm not waiting minutes. So I've got this hash, right, and I want to de-anonymize this hash. I want to figure out who that taxi driver is. Well, I just use the Googles. Right, so I've got this hash. I have this value here, and I think it's probably, I know it's one of the taxi cab medallion numbers, but I don't know which one. So I plug it into Google. And Google's like, oh yeah, that's 9C19. And so now I know that all the data that has this little thing associated with it, it all belongs to the guy driving taxi 9C19, and I can go through the data file and completely de-anonymize this person. So these are the kinds of well-intentioned things that go wrong. which means that when the National Health Service in the UK, so they have a medical service for the entire nation, when they wanted to do something like this, they paused. They didn't just rush headlong into it. And think about this. This is where the digitization actually sort of lets us down, and we don't realize the benefits that technology could bring us because we can't do it well in society. So the NHS, there's about 60 million people in the United Kingdom, and they've had the NHS for 80 years. Maybe only the last 20 to 30 years have they had good electronic medical records. But still, this is a lot of medical data. You not only have like conditions and symptoms that people experienced, you've got date of birth, gender, ethnicity for a lot of these folks. You've got what interventions and treatments were tried, and did the symptoms get better or worse? You have vast quantities of really valuable data. You could do science on this data if you could get your hands on this data. But we need to make sure that it's anonymous, right? You can't just give up medical patients' data and give it to some private firm like a medical research firm or insurance company. If we could find a way to do that, we would learn things. And if we learned these things, then we would benefit society. But it turns out that if you anonymize things fairly well, if you take out name, address, postcode, gender, its epidemiological value of that data actually goes really, really low. And then you almost run the risk of making false conclusions because you don't have enough data. So it turns out that they paused this entire project and didn't go forward, and it's sort of percolating in the background. They wish they could come up with a way to do this data in a way that doesn't expose the confidential patient data, but does in fact promote the welfare of society. It would benefit us. So digitizing our lives has some real benefits, but then sometimes we just get hamstrung by the need to do the right thing. So in conclusion, as we think about data in our lives and we think about what we should do, what does this stuff mean? What's the takeaway message for us as a society, for us as individuals? And then since I know that I have a number of technology, math, and CS folks here in the audience, what do we as technologists want to do? So first, us as society. I think it's hugely important to start tackling some of the moral, ethical, and sort of policy concerns related to what technology is making possible in society. And even if you look at some of the sort of leading laws, like the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulations in Europe, they're actually kind of ahead. They're actually one of the most significant and most forward-looking laws out there, and it's of course based on like 8-year-old technology, back when the legislators kind of said, hey, we should take a look at this stuff. By the time a law gets through all of that deliberation and takes effect, it's woefully behind the actual state of the art. Over here, I think in America, we've even done less. And I think as a society, we need to push for the hard questions to get asked. I'm conscious of standing here at a liberal arts college where we encourage that sort of thinking big about connections between ethics and philosophy and technology and so on. This is a good kind of place to have those thoughts. And are we as a citizenship engaged enough? Are we pushing what we need up to our legislators and to our policymakers? As individuals, I think what we probably have learned this evening, if you didn't know some of these things already, is we need to be a little bit more skeptical. I think a lot of times we sort of think to ourselves, well, what could possibly go wrong? What harm could there be? And it turns out that a lot of times, you and I, we're not experts on a lot of what harm could there be. So when we ask that question, we think to ourselves, I can't imagine any harm. Well, you know what? I'm not an expert actually in imagining harm. And I think we need to be a bit more judicious and a bit more discerning in what information we share and what we give away and what we do as individuals. And that is because of what I believe we should do as technologists. When you're dealing with data in society, when you are digitizing this world around us, it is very difficult to take something that wasn't anonymous to begin with and anonymize it. That's one of these classically hard problems. And most data doesn't start particularly anonymous. So most of the data that we have about ourselves is pretty intimately tied to who we are and what we are And it's hard to separate the identities from those things. So as technologists, when we create technology, it's important to think about, do we need the data? Should we have the data? Perhaps we just don't need it. I don't know if you follow the news on this, if it would have hit your radar, but recently the guys at Whisper Systems were able to reveal, because a federal gag order had lapsed, they had a 1-year gag order, and they're able to reveal now that they have been served with a federal warrant for information about a subscriber. Now, Whisper Systems makes an app called Signal. It's encrypted communication like an iMessage or chat, but it's encrypted. And when the government came to them and said, we want all the following data about these 2 subscribers, the guys at Signal said, of course, we're a law-abiding company. We will honor this the search warrant. We can tell you this is the date they created the account. This is the last time they logged in. That's what we got. It's all yours. And it's because they had designed their system at the very beginning to hold very, very little data. Data that you don't have can't be misused. Data that you do have, we may find some way to misuse it tomorrow that we can't think of today. So as technologists, we have to be conscious that just because we can't think of some way to do things today doesn't mean it will never be thought of later. So that's my concluding thought about data and privacy in our lives. It's important that we think big thoughts about this, and that we exert that external pressure upward and outward. Thank you very much.